Plant wall is leaking.
Hey, sir.
Yo.
I have a problem with your Teams thing.
Oh,
Your Teams link wouldn't open.
okay, I'll fix it. Yeah, I'll try to fix it. I'll do something. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Word, use it to sign in with your school.
Okay, so if you sign in with your school email, it should work.
Sure.
So, there's a test next week. Friday, yeah. I'm hoping everybody saw the announcement. Test details. I think this is the right one. Nope. I should start labeling my announcements like in the header. This is for section 8, this is for section 9. So, the test. The test will be held next Friday. It will be held in this room at the time that we usually have our class at. That is 12 p.m. The test will be a pen and paper test. No outside aids are permitted, but a formula sheet will be provided. So you don't have to prepare a formula sheet, one will be provided. However, oh, like a crib sheet or a cheat sheet. Yeah. In the context of programming, it's really more like a quick reference sheet. Give me 1 second. While the formula sheet will be provided, it is the humble opinion of your humble professor that the creation of a cheat sheet / formula sheet / syntax reference sheet, that is the act of you making one, is an exceptionally good way to study. Even if you're not permitted to bring the thing to the test, I still recommend making one and posting it or sticking it to your wall somewhere where you're programming. It's just a very helpful thing to have and a very helpful thing to do. You had a question?
I was going to ask, it was the thing last semester with Scala. When the lockdown browser exists, why are we doing paper tests?
Excellent question. So the question is, this gentleman in the corner challenges the idea of doing paper tests in the first place in a world where lockdown browsers exist. The horrible, sad truth of it is that even with the lockdown browser, it's still relatively easy to get around it. People have various ways of cheating the system, which I'm not going to get into here for fear of perpetuating that information. And when it comes to courses which have a fair number of part-timers who are less experienced in these sorts of things, teaching, it really makes more sense to have a unified approach to trying to restrict some of that cheating behavior. Basically, the online tests are still distributed online, and no matter what we do, people always seem to find some way to get around whatever we're doing to try to prevent it. Whereas paper tests, physical paper copy, demonstrates a greater degree of security because I bring them with me, I take them when I go, when you have to leave your paper in the room to have it graded and that sort of thing, you're not allowed to have cell phones. Anyway, the paper tests are more secure than the online tests, even now, even with the existence of the lockdown browsers. So there has been a general move in the departments to go back to the paper tests. This course being one You are allowed to have whatever opinion you like, but I'm not gonna take a paper test and turn it to an online test just for you. So, any other questions?
Did I hear you say that it was gonna be in this room on Friday? Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Oh,
Because we haven't.
no, we're in a different room on Friday. Yeah, pardon me. Yeah.
I was like.
Pardon me, yeah. My stars. Yes, no, the test will be written in our regular section room, which I forget what it is, but I have to go
It's
down.
like
81?
Yeah, it's A012. A012, that's where we will write the test. Very good. The test is designed to be written in 90 minutes. However, you are given the entire 1 hour and 50-minute block that we have for our class. So in theory, everyone is being given 20 minutes of bonus time on the test by default. If you happen to be a person with a SSA accommodation that falls within that extra allotment, you are welcome to write either here or in the testing center, whichever of the two you prefer. So, good. This was somebody else in the other class asked this. So, just to clarify, there is a requirement in this course that you pass the exam component of the course in order to pass the class. To be perfectly clear, the average of your exam component must be at least 50%, right? Taking into account the respective weighting of the midterm versus the exam. So, you may fail the test and continue in the course, and the exam will determine whether or not you pass. You have to score higher on the exam if you fail the midterm. That's how it works. Question?
What if you get exactly 50?
That's a pass.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you get a 40 on the midterm and a 60 on the exam,
Assuming that both of them would be equally weighted, yes, that would be still a pass.
Cool.
I think it's 20-40, but I keep forgetting to verify that with Professor Adams. Yes. Any questions with respect to that? Yeah.
On the official, I don't know what this is, course documents, it says midterm exam is 30% and final exam is 30%.
Oh, well, there you go. 50-50. There you go. That's rather unusual. Normally the midterm is weighted less than the exam. Yeah. Normally the test is viewed as being a formative assessment, or it's an assessment, but it's in some sense a formative assessment as well. Yeah, and it's typical to not penalize people too heavily by not knowing things for the middle of the course. Anyway, if it says 30-30, then it's 30-30, and that's what we'll go with. So, yeah. So, this is the documentation considers the test to be an exam, quote, so, yeah, study up, study appropriately. Any questions about the midterm? Yes?
what weeks does it cover?
It covers all of the material that we've covered so far, with the exception of binary file uploads. So the very last topic that we covered.
Working with files will be on there?
Working with files will certainly be on there, but working with binary files specifically and using post file upload method, you know that last example we did, that is not going to be on the test.
Okay.
However, file I/O with plain text most certainly will be on the test. follow-up question?
Will there be like, now last year in Java, we had like a midterm review where you would have like questions uploaded and like a test kind of mock-up? Will there be
Yes,
something like that this year or no?
As I am aware, a mock test has not come to, like a proper mock test that's like from a previous year or something like that. As far as I'm aware, there's no such thing that exists. I'll continue to sort of poke and prod to see if I can find something. There are the questions that you showed me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
John Grant said he made more.
Who did?
Jonathan Grant,
Oh, did he?
he's doing PhD as well.
Yeah, and he used to own the course.
I don't know if he's still in this one or got that, but.
Yeah, no, he owned it like 2 years ago and,
Well, he said he saw the test, and that he's made some, so.
yeah, okay.
It is PhD.
Well, I'll go see if I can get something out of Jonathan. Is he? Well,
We have him next semester.
I won't bother him
We
right now.
have him next semester, I'll ask him.
It's okay, I have his email. He and I are on good terms, so I think I'll be able to get it from him. Yeah, so basically, the plan for this week is that we're going to do test review. We're going to review all of the stuff that we've been doing so far. I have a couple of questions that we can go through, and that's basically the plan. In terms of general, like, what you can expect for the test, well,
The
it's,
first half's kind of like syntax, all the short answers, and the next half is like.
you can kind of expect something that's about halfway between the Java test and the JavaScript exam, right? In terms of like what the questions feel like. So on the Java test, the first section of the Java test was typically only testing you for like syntax. Do you remember how to declare this and that word, right? On this one, you will be dealing with more conceptual problems with like short answer questions. So this will be testing the knowledge about, server transactions, how data flows through the client into the server, through the PHP script, and then back out to the client. All of that stuff all of those topics that we've been studying that are kind of around the actual PHP programming, but are not specifically PHP programming, right? Typical
A
topics.
little more theory, a little less practice.
Precisely, yeah. It's a bit more theoretically oriented. Pay particular attention to those topics that occurred in the first week, and have a good handle on any of those like non-coding sections that we talked about subsequently. Like for example, the XSS stuff is in that category as well, right? Make sense? After that, you have the test kind of broken down very similarly to the Java test again, with a sort of, like, you have like the more straightforward coding questions and then like longer, slightly more complicated coding questions in two different sections, even though like I kind of think those two sections bleed together quite a lot in a lot of respects, but anyway. So there's PHP programming, there's a section of the test on that, there's a section on knowledge. Make sense? No. As a matter of fact, the test is still under the process of revision. So I do not have that information, even if I was at liberty to disclose, and I generally don't tell students how many questions there are or what they're worth, because this is not necessarily useful information. Like you can have a test that's 2 questions, right? You can have a test that's out of 100 and a test that's out of 20, and it's still the same amount of work. Both of these are not objective measurements of test difficulty, right?
So like when you say long coding questions, like when you guys started
Oh, no. Like, it's still like to be written on a test, it's just like, I don't know, I wanna say like slightly trickier, if that makes sense? Like you have the straightforward ones and the less straightforward ones. It's similar to the division between the B and the C sections on the Java tests.
So it's gotchas.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say gotchas. I would say we're testing at a slightly higher level your understanding of the programming language semantics. So, any other questions? Okay. So,
Oh, I have a question.
oh, yes.
What's your social insurance number?
444 444 447. So. So I have some review questions. They came to me through mysterious channels. So, let's get XAMPP and VS Code up and running. And let's bang these out, shall we? Let's just start right to q1.php. There we go. There we go. Hopefully everybody still remembers how to do that. Good. So we have question1.php. All it's doing is a hello world, just to make sure that we have that we're loading our file correctly using XAMPP. So far, so good. So, question 1. Write a PHP function which takes a single argument x with the following criteria. X must be an integer greater than 1. If this is not the case, it should return the value of error. If x is an integer greater than 1, then the function must return the sum of all integers between 0 and x. Example, 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. You are not required to print out the equation, just the final result. This should be relatively straightforward. So, How do we write a function? Function keyword. Function name. Foo. Always foo. Takes an, yeah, sorry?
Football.
No,
If you really want to.
no, foo and bar are separate. It's foo, bar, and baz. If you need a third, which you sometimes do. So the origins of foo and bar are mysterious.
They really aren't.
They aren't? Oh, have they, well, no, they,
You told us they are, sir.
yeah. Well, not all the classes heard my story. Yeah. Anyway, fine, I won't tell my story now. Serves you right.
Sir, we have Google.
The words were found in a basement attached to switches on a model train set in the basement of a professor who worked at MIT, foo and bar. That's the earliest known record we have of foo and bar being used as variable names. And yes, it's likely derived from the World War II slang F-U-B-A-R, which is effed up beyond all reason. So, this is PHP. Do we have a return type?
That's pretty,
Hmm?
I guess it does.
We do not necessarily require a return type. In later versions of PHP, it is possible to provide type annotations, similarly to what you see in the documentation. But plain old PHP works the same way as JavaScript. It does not require a return type. Do I require a type on my parameter? No, for the same reason. This is a weak language, weakly typed language. So, we wish to evaluate to see if x is greater than 0.
So do we not have to validate the integer?
So let's examine the question.
So,
The question says, write a PHP function which does the following. So the subject of the question is only the function itself. We are going to have to step outside of this problem definition to actually give it some input. Does that make sense? So the question is only asking for a function, but obviously if we're going to test it, we're going to have to do some other stuff with it, maybe validate it. But for me, I'm probably just going to set a variable and like pass it in and not worry about that part yet. Do you have a question? Okay. Anybody else have a question? So this is kind of like, hopefully you all remember this from intro to programming. If x is greater than 0, do good things, else do bad things. So, here's a question. What's the next keyword? Is it return or is it echo? It's return. Yeah?
The one that the dollar sign on the X. It also doesn't the practice question say greater than 1?
Oh, does it say greater than 1?
0.
Yes. Pardon me. There we go. Thank you. So, please understand the difference between returning a string from a function and echoing a string from a function. I saw quite a lot of this on the assignment 1 submissions, and I smacked people's wrists every time I saw it. You're not to return, like you're not to print from functions if that's avoidable, unless it's for the purposes of debugging and temporary. The function interface means you're sending the data out through the regular methods, which is the return statement, right? You do not you do not echo directly inside of a function in PHP for the same reason that you do not use system.out.println inside of a subclass in Java, right? It's not part of the interface. I know we don't really have classes here, and that it seems like a very simple language, but we still need to program like good programmers. So, return carefully. And the good thing is to return some value after we calculate it. Question?
You said don't echo from functions, but if you have like a wrapper function that executes all your functions, gets the return value, and then echoes from that function, is that okay, or?
So if the purpose of the function is to like encapsulate what is properly user interaction or some kind of interactive state, then that's fine because the purpose of that function is that interaction, right?
Okay.
But if it's just a math function that's supposed to be doing something mathematical, right? You shoot yourself in the foot by allowing it to go over. Another way of thinking it is letting this thing go over the head of the rest of the PHP script and like kick things out to the client directly, right?
Okay.
It's better design. I know I feel like I spend so much time in these classes saying, while it's possible to do this, you never should. And that's just kind of how programming goes. It's very easy to shoot yourself in the foot.
If it's possible, why should we not do it? Like, if it's an option, why do they put it in there?
It's possible for me to murder my brother, but I still shouldn't do it. That's
Okay.
not a very good moral argument.
Sir, no, it's not a moral argument, sir. This is a programming argument. Someone made this programming language with the intention that that should be used.
No, not necessarily. Like, no. You are putting way too much like forethought. You're giving the people who designed the language way too much credit. It's a language, right? The people who designed this language only designed the grammar, right? And they wrote the functions, right? If you wanted to throw in a bunch of rules like that, you would like incredibly complicate the compiler and the parser, and it would just like there's another like separation that occurs when in compiler design between the definition of the syntax and the application of semantics to that syntax. If you take a bunch of stuff that's got semantic content and exclude it syntactically, you're basically you're using the problem to try to solve the problem, and it won't work. Ultimately, it won't work. It's like asking, like, why is it possible for me to speak a badly, like, trying to find an example where I won't get myself in trouble. Let's say that the government had a policy that nobody was to ever insult a hamster, right? It's like, why then would the government allow the dictionary to allow combinations of words that would result in insults to hamsters? It's like, well, that's a misunderstanding of how human language works, right? Yeah. Anyway, all right. Back to the thing. For loop. For I equals 1, I is less than or equal to x, I plus plus. Doop. Gotta do the dollar sign, yeah. I know you want to start it from 0, but I'm going to start it from 1. Because adding 0 is a waste of time. That's why. Sum plus equals I There we go. All right, question?
Shouldn't you also be checking to make sure that x is an integer, because it could be like 3.2 and it wants it to be in there.
Very true, very good. I forgot about that part. Yes? Marvelous. X must be an integer greater than 1. I was assuming that it was already an integer. So there are a couple of different ways of doing this in PHP. I learned about PHP recently that it is a community-driven language with very little top-level control. This is why there's like 2 or 3 functions that do everything that you want to do and you have to pick one. Because basically 2 or 3 people were like, oh, I want one that does it this way. I want one that does it this way. And they just add it and there you have it forever. So there are a couple of ways of going about this. There's is int might not be included in the
I
version.
had to cast it as an int, and then check it versus x. So I could cast x as an int, and then equal x. With check it as an int.
You had to do
I
this?
can show you what I have to do, because I did it with the,
That?
yeah.
Not my preferred method. There's also a get type function. Get type, which will return a string that indicates the type of the thing you put in.
It's always a string, right? PHP always reads it as a string, no matter what.
Well, not necessarily. I haven't like set what the thing is yet.
So I had to check it if it was numeric, and then I had to cast it as an int, like that.
Right, because you were reading from externally, and externally it would have
I
been
was
passed
reading
in
from
as
again.
Yeah, right, yeah, yep, makes sense, makes sense. In my case, I was just gonna do something like q is equal to 10, and then just pass it in. In which case, I'm already sure that that's an integer. But, you know, yes, if you were taking input from a form on an HTML page, that gets passed in through the packet as a string. It would need to be cast as an integer prior to being passed into this function, I would say. Because the function assumes an integer as input. Sound good? Yeah. Question?
I found the function ctype_digit would actually make sure it's a digit and not even a decimal or like negative. So, yeah, that's what I used in assignment.
Let's see here. C_type,
Ctype_digit.
C-type, digit. Checks if all the characters in the provided string text are numerical. Yeah, that would do. However, would it work on negatives?
It actually excludes negatives and periods as well. It's
Yeah.
a pure number.
So actually, in that manner, like, all you would then have to check is to see if it was equal to 0, right? Everything else is excluded by that check. Yeah, you see what I mean about there being like umpteen gazillion ways of doing any particular thing? Question?
Can't you just put int before the name of the variable and the parameters of the function, and it'll make sure it's an int?
So casting to int will fail if it's not castable to an int, I believe.
That's why you check it as an int.
Yeah, although we could try that. Let's try it. Let's see here. Echo cast as int.
I meant in the actual function, like in foo, before
Yeah.
the dogs and eggs, you can straight int, and it'll do a type check on it.
So my inclination would be to put the cast outside of the function, because in our definition of the function that was given in the question, it says it takes it as an integer. right? So if we were thinking about this in a kind of a Java sense, in a more strictly typed sense, that function would have like int as the type of the input. And although it kind of like, it might feel a little bit like I'm not using the full advantages of the language I'm using, it'll benefit you in the long run to use a weakly typed language as if it's a strictly typed language, right? So like this is actually basically one of my ultimate complaints against weakly typed languages is like, to program in this effectively and clearly and well and sustainably and all of the good things, right? You basically need to hold all of the type annotations in your brain instead of putting them down on paper, right? Which you should just be able to just put them down on paper, which is why the type annotations exist in the first place.
Did you filter the input or you just filter the validate in?
In here, which input?
Pardon?
Which
The
input?
X. Did you filter, like use the filter input method?
Nope. I haven't, so it depends on the point of origin of the data, right? At the moment, this is just the value of a variable contained within this script, right? So I know that that doesn't contain an XSS attack, right? Unless I write one myself. So the point of origin of the data matters. You need to do that when it's originating from a client, or if you're reading data that has been stored in a file on the server, which may have at one point originated from a client. Make sense? So yeah, you don't have to you don't have to use filter input on every single input you ever write to any function. So let's see how this works. And maybe I'll just echo some breaks in here. So there we have it. So, in the case of integer casting of 1, 2, 3, 4, we get what we expect. In the case of integer casting something that is non-numeric, we get a numeric value of 0, not even like a false or something. Right? Problematic? Yeah. And if we have a mixed string, it numerically converts as much of that string as it can and returns that and discards the rest. Question? Okay.
What happens if you put like a number after path? Will it just go straight out the middle?
But I was going to do that myself.
Will it just show up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
It just stops. Yeah. It ignores any numeric characters after the first non-numeric character. It's not filtering out non-numeric characters.
Or just nothing?
Let's take a look.
So it just like locks it off once it hits.
Zero.
So it repeats it.
Zero represents false.
I don't,
Usually it prints it out.
what?
Whenever you use prints that are false, it's all, it doesn't show anything. But
False prints as an empty string?
Yeah, but if you put true, it'll print 1.
I hate this language.
So we all,
Hmm?
we all do.
Yeah. We all suffer together, right? Yes?
I did, you would go to the training whatever, worked in, running, actually running the function you wrote. How we like it set up currently. Passing Q is, provides an error. It doesn't trigger the if statement. Errors happen.
Let me see. People had so many questions, I didn't actually, test this thing. So Q,
Around the meeting.
change that.
Or you just get like.
Because I don't know how like the YouTube, but the YouTube, I might get demonetized if I call that, yeah. Error. Interesting, all right. Let's see. Ah, there we go. Yep, that would do it. Alright, so get type returns the full word integer, not just int. Good. Alright, any further questions? Note that I have not hooked this up to an HTML page. It was not required by the question. A very, very good practice when writing tests is to answer within the bounds of the question and not provide a bunch of stuff the question didn't ask for, because it's not worth anything. And it just wastes my time and yours. Everybody's time is wasted. So please read the question. I do. I read. I am a literate person. I actually read books. I do. I like paper ones.
What was the most recent book you read?
The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky.
Wait,
I was looking for pointers.
what's his last name?
Fyodor Dostoevsky.
Oh, I thought you said, oh wait, that is his name, the guy who wrote Crime and Punishment.
Yeah, Crime and Punishment. Yeah, that's the same guy. He's actually like my absolute favorite author of all time.
Yeah, he's really good. I like his outlook on life.
I've read all of his major works except The Idiot, and I'm almost finished it. So, number 2, let's move along. Write a single PHP program which presents the user with an HTML form with an input field which takes in a string. I find this problem to be already problematically worded. Are we going to put the HTML form inside of the PHP script? Have we done that yet? Like, it's possible, but do we want to do that? Not likely. When we do this problem, I'm going to make the HTML separate from the PHP script. When submitted, your PHP should output every second word in the string that is provided. If the user provides no input, your PHP should output no string provided. So, breaking that down, we have an HTML page with a form, an input text box. When we click submit, the next page will give you every other word in that text box. Make sense? Good. Question 2.html. Question 2.php. Shebang. So, type the exclamation mark and hit the tab.
Oh, I was trying to figure that out.
I'm sorry you had JavaScript with whoever you had.
I've been out of school for a little bit.
Ah,
Yeah, I took that class a while ago.
Alright, because this,
Just rusty.
yeah. Okay. Make a form. Make an input. Type is equal to text. Probably doesn't like this. Name is equal to, user input, something like that. Next, input type equal to submit. Submit. Value. Submit. What is the attribute name which gives you which PHP script you're targeting? Anybody remember? Action. Question2.php. And does it specify in the question get or post? Nope. So let's just use post. Why not? Method equals post. And that's all you need, really. On this side, I'm like, this is like the super quick version. I don't care about labels. Question?
Doesn't the text input need an ID?
No. The ID is used if you need to access that data from JavaScript. Right? In this case, name is the field which is used to generate the query, the parameters in the query. Or, sorry, not the query. The parameters in the packet. You know, the packet payload. So yeah, question 2. There we go. There we go. A neat little thing, which is useful for debugging. If you stay on the page where a post request has been sent, and you reload the page, it'll ask you if you want to resend the post request, which you can do, and then you don't have to like go back to the previous page and re-enter it every time, because that is just a pain in the butt, just a pain in the keister. So, now to our PHP script. PHP. There we go. Now, we are taking data from a user. What do we do to that data? We turn it into a variable and filter the input. What do we never do with a client?
Trust them.
We never trust the client. So, because I'm super original for variable names right now. Filter input. Our parameters are type, var name, and filter type. So, what does the first type refer to? Our first parameter here. Somebody else though. What's the first type? What's it the type of?
Technical.
Type of what?
Text.
Type of text? No.
The type of request.
Type of request, yes. Is that what you said?
No.
No, okay. I might just be, my ears sometimes don't work correctly. So, you have to specify what type the request is. Input underscore get post cookie server or environment. This is being sent by post. So the next parameter is input post. Next we have the name of the parameter which we are trying to read. This is the same as the name of the input. And obviously if you were like servicing an AJAX request, then you would read the JavaScript code to find what the name was that was spliced into the request or that sort of thing, right? You always look that up. So it's user input. User input. Right. Next, filters. Filter underscore. So this is basically, yes, we sanitize the string because it is a string that we're expecting in. This is the point at which you select the data type, right? If this is an integer, it's filter validate integer. If it's a float, filter validate float. If it's an email address, filter validate or sanitize email address. In our case, this is just a regular plain old string. So does anybody remember which filter we use? Yeah. Filter sanitize special characters. Mm-hmm.
So how is that different than filter sanitize string, which removes all?
Sanitize string removes the characters. Sanitize special characters swaps the characters out for equivalent characters that look the same when you render them, but do not form valid HTML tags. We can actually like compare the difference if we want to, but let's special chars. Let's do that first. So let's, for the time being, let's echo our input directly so that we can examine the difference. So, but if I want to test validation, I'm going to have to put something a little nasty in there.
Sir, what's the difference between filter sanitize special char and filter sanitize full special char?
I don't know. Let me finish this example and then we'll look it up.
Sure.
So, I will just for the moment demonstrate the unsafe method. This will be good review. Does anybody remember what the unsafe method is? Yes? No? At the back?
Be getting it from the post super global and just echoing it.
Precisely. We get it from the post super global. So the post super global contains only that raw data which was received from the packet. It's not been filtered, it's not been sanitized, nothing has been done to it. It's just the raw data. So if we echo that back, you can see that we get the JavaScript actually executed, which is undesirable. Right? Recall that this is the entry point to being able to, put a source attribute in that script tag targeting some malicious script on somebody else's server, right? That will just get executed by the JavaScript, or executed by the client because it's been parsed as valid JavaScript. So, what we want to do let's compare here. First of all, notice that sanitized string has been crossed out, which means it's being deprecated. Now, whether it's deprecated in the 7.4 version that is on CS Unix is another question, but in the 8 point whatever version, which is likely running here, I wonder if it will work anyways, because it doesn't seem to be a error. It's giving me a strike through, but I wonder if I ignore the strike through. Yeah, it still works. So, filter sanitize string removes the tags. It's more of a true filtering operation. Compare that to the operation of sanitize special characters. We get the characters still appearing, but they are not being rendered as HTML. And I believe if you open up Notepad, you can see something kind of interesting happen here. Ah, okay, they are. Okay, never mind. Well, maybe if we like.
You printed out the integer values of those.
Well, at any rate,
Could you echo the ASCII codes to those to see if they're different?
how do you do that? Echo the ASCII code.
Can you convert it to an integer? That works in C sharp. Just pass it as an int, maybe it'll, I don't know.
In theory, the first element should be. Nope, doesn't convert. All right. Right, yeah, because it's a non-numeric character, right? So it's going to convert as 0.
Maybe convert it to an integer. But that would prove that it's not the same ASCII code as.
I think it's there's got to be a function for it. Is it ordinal? Yeah, there we go. That's interesting, because that is the ASCII code. Pretty sure.
For the,
What's character 38? Let's take a look. Oh, it's an and. Oh, interesting.
So is it not the same?
So it's an ampersand?
It's not the same. I know. Listen, I don't care.
Fair. What? The breaks in the.
Breaks.
38, 35, 54, 48, 59, 11, 59.
Yeah, as you can, okay, maybe I can, is there a character function converted back? No? PHP converts ASCII value char. It's gotta be a solved problem, right? Oh, okay, it doesn't have an A, alright.
it's just,
It's just chirp. I think we've reached the end of like the educational value of this example. So you know that thing where like a copyright symbol is actually like 4 characters?
Yeah.
That's what's going on here. It's converting it for another one of those. This symbol is like 4 characters. That's why you have like, when we were printing 6 of them, we get, this is 4 characters, and then you got S and C. Right? Anyway. Alright. Anyway, so that's what it's doing. Alright, now let's write the loop. This calls for a little bit of string processing. So, does anybody know of a function which allows us to break a sentence into words? Similar to Python's split operation.
Oh,
It's got a very dramatic name.
Oh.
yes.
It's explode, right?
It's explode.
Yes.
Yes.
Character explosion.
Yeah. So,
So would that be on a cheat sheet if we had used one of those? With the definition?
yeah, like if string, like basic string operations,
Like
would be.
explode method would be on the cheat sheet.
Well, the cheat sheet hasn't been written yet, so.
No, but if we had to use explode on the test, they would be on a cheat sheet.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
The definition.
I don't know. Stop asking me, I don't know. So, the separator. So the first argument is so what explode does is it takes a string and it breaks it into pieces according to a character boundary. You have to set what the character is. Quick hint, if you ever have to do anything with something like a CSV file, right, then your separator is the comma. In this case, because we're breaking a sentence into words, the separator will be space character. Very good. And then our input string is input. And let's just oh yeah. There you go. That's another like quick little hint for y'all. JSON encode. So before, when it was just a string, it prints fine. If you try to print an array directly, it won't work, right? It'll just say array. I can show you.
The explode doesn't
It turns it into an array, yes. Inputs. Notice, array to string conversion. Array. Right? So, yes, what the explode method, or the explode function does, is it takes a string and creates an array of all of the split up strings. Therefore, when you view it, you need to use some way to view it which is easy, rather than writing a loop and printing every element individually, which is a pain in the butt. Just JSON encode it. Send it off. Make sense? Now, we wanted to print every second element, right? Every second, yeah. So again, there are going to be many methods of doing this. Kind of like for each loops. For each, for each word as input, I believe. must have these ones. There we go. I will perhaps put a space in there. Ta-da!
You're only supposed to echo every second one.
Yes, I'm getting to that.
Excuse me.
Consider yourself excused. So, the way I'm going to do this is with a binary flick, flop, flag. Flag is true. There we go. If flag that, then flag equals not flag. Ta-da! So if your if statement only contains one thing, you can inline it. Everybody cool with the logic going on here?
But if you want to do it, it says every second there, but, so I would be, put the next word.
Oh.
They just start flag as false.
Starting with the second word, yeah. Easy, you just set this to false. And you folks were probably gonna go generating all of the indexes and using modulus operator, weren't you? Yeah, that perfectly valid. It's just, more operations, a little bit slower. My version is faster, thank you very much. Depending on how much overhead a for each loop has, actually. I'm not sure what the comparison between like a regular for loop and a for each loop is. Who knows? Question?
How to do list comprehension in PHP? In PHP. List comprehension. Same with
List
Python.
comprehension, ooh, I have no idea. Let's see. Let's see if that's a thing that's supported. That's not really what, okay, I should read the text. Sadly, PHP does not have this structure, but it can be achieved using the array map function, I guess. I mean, I'm not quite sure that adheres to the strict definition of what a list comprehension is. But, PHP doesn't have list comprehensions. I'm gonna just, let's put a pin in it, it doesn't have them. If you wanna make them and add them to the PHP community, be my guest. Question?
I didn't create a for each function, I did a for loop.
Yep.
And then inside there I did I plus I times 2. So like, what's a better way of like making it, is there a better way, actually I'll just ask you that. Like, is there a better way of making it so you don't have to put it inside of your function? Because then like, if the array is out of bounds, then, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, so the, another way of doing it for I equals 0, I is less than input dot, or length of it, I think I have to say, no, it's count
Yeah, I used to know that.
count input I times equals, or not times equals, I plus equals 2. There we go. Because you want to go skip. Do the same.
Okay.
Echo.
I understand that.
Like that. There you go. List comprehensions are cool, by the way. I recommend looking into them if you're interested in programming and stuff. List comprehension is a thing where you state like what the set that you want to apply the filters to is, and then you write a few Boolean filters, and it will generate a list that has all of the included elements in it for you, and it's like, it's a very mathy way of going about constructing something, which is very convenient. Oh yeah, it would be word, it would be input at I. Yeah, pardon me. And you'd have to wrap it up like present Christmas. Make sense? Any questions? Cool. Okay. Shall we move along then? I think we've answered that question. Let's just take a quick look. Oh, if the user provides no input, then your PHP should output no string provided. There we go. All right. So this is good review. What happens, what do we get if filter input fails? There are 2 ways it can fail. What are those 2 ways? Well, we are filtering something, right? What happens if we give it something that doesn't pass the filter? What gets written to the variable? Crickets. Crickets. Come on. PHP has this nasty habit of doing this when something it's trying to do fails. It outputs one particular value, which it does instead of having a proper exception handling system. Not 0. False! That's right. So, filter input will return false if the filter failed, if the input didn't get past the filter. This isn't really a thing that happens with strings, as strings will always have the empty string, even if everything else is taken out of the string by sanitized strings, which you're not supposed to use anyways. You'll still have an empty string left over, right? But for integers, for example, if the thing that you receive is not an integer, filter input will return false. So, if input is false,
So does that mean every variable that you make in PHP is has a completely attached to it as well? What? That's
yes. PHP is a weakly typed language. So, yeah, they are not declared with a data type. There is nothing restricting them to being one particular data type at any point in time. This is actually the same way that variables in Python operate. The variable is the type of the thing that is written to it. So, it is absolutely the case that you can have a variable that could be an integer, or it could be a Boolean, or it could even be this other thing that we're going to talk about very shortly. So, use strict equality when comparing these types of things, because filter input also has a second failure state. This failure state occurs when the parameter it's looking for was not found in the response packet. What does it output? For $1,000, what does this output? Nope, doesn't output a type error, because it tries to ignore the fact that errors exist for the most part. How many literals do we have that represent bad states in PHP? We got false, which is Boolean.
No.
That's it. We also have null. So, if the input is false, input failed to validate. If input is equal to null, input not found in packet, or parameter not found in packet. Actually, why don't I just echo that? So to simulate this, I'm going to try misspelling my input, the name of the input parameter. Parameter not found in packet. There you have it. And notice, that I'm using the return function, or the return statement, to just end the PHP script. If you recall the suggested use of return statements from Java, this is not a suggested use of a return statement, which should occur at the end of a function. In some sense, it's slightly more proper to put all of this inside of like the else case of these things, right? But, there you have it. Any questions? Good. So, question?
If you go back and change the code to an actual browse one correctly, then you get a quick blank. Don't get one error message, just actually outright do it blank. At least.
Let me see here. Let me just take a look and make sure the form is updated. Yes, it is. Okay. Blank. Submit. Yeah, you get nothing.
function and return one of the two error messages saying that there was no definition?
Well,
Because that's what that practice question is telling us to do, so if it's an empty box, it needs to say something about it.
let's see here. If the user provides no input, right, yeah, okay. So, this actually is this is an important point, because when it comes to strings, an empty string is still a valid string, right? So, it doesn't have any special characters in it to sanitize. Here's a question. Does an empty string contain anything at all? No? Oh, no? That's right. The empty string contains the null character. You usually don't have to check for it explicitly if you just check for an empty string. That will usually catch it. So, if input is equal to the empty string.
Could you put if input is equal to no?
Hmm?
Could you put if input is equal to no?
No, that's different. That means something else. That means that the parameter wasn't found. Yeah. So, user input was empty. Ta-da! Question?
What type of input would we put in if we wanted it to echo the input failed to validate?
Doesn't, you can't really get there with, strings. That case only applies to integers. If I were to, comment this out for a moment. Change this to filter validate int, for example. Echo input. If I enter 14, I get 14. If I enter cat, input failed to validate.
But in this case, since it's strings,
Yeah, because like the empty string is what you get, like, strings are kind of weird because they don't have a failure state, in terms of filtering. Even if you're using a sanitized string instead of sanitized special characters, which removes nonsense, even if you remove every character in that string, the null character will still be there, so it's still a valid string, right? So yeah, strings kind of don't have a false state here, but everything else does. So, any questions? Yeah, it's got some stuff going on. Yeah.
Questions do this right on the test.
Sorry.
Will the questions do this right on the test?
Well, yes. Unfortunately, this is actually still not that complicated, right? We're also doing a couple of checks that aren't explicitly called for in the question, but are definitely good practice, So yeah. Shall we move on to question 3? Okay. PHP program that simulates a roulette wheel. Every load of the page picks a number between 0 and 36 and displays it in a cell in a table with the word result. If the number is even, the cell should appear white text, red background. If it's odd, black background, white text. If it's 0, yellow and green. So, I am going to take a one-page application type, MVC architecture type approach to this problem, and I hope to convince you that this is a superior way of approaching it. So, let's take a look. File, new file, question3.php. So, rather than immediately launching in and producing my PHP tags, I'm going to start off by designing the HTML. So, we know we want a table. That table should have a row. That row should have a cell. That cell should contain the word result, and then something. Right? Now, hopefully everybody realized that the correct way to make these background and colored things appear is by using CSS styling properties. But there are a couple of ways that we can approach this. Do we like inline CSS or do we not like inline CSS? We do not like it. And, you know, it's very important when you pick up like new skills not to like regress back to old ways of doing old skills, bad ways of doing old skills, you know? So, one way we could do this is we could throw our style tag in here and then populate that result from PHP. But I would argue a better way of doing that, and I know that I'm about to like put the style block in the header, which is like only marginally better than externalizing the CSS, but literally all you have to do is take it and copy it to a file so it still works. I'm going to use classes. No. Bloody autocomplete. You think you can program better than me? Alright. So, some classes. Red. No. Black. Sodium crypto box key pair from secret. What the? Calm down, guys. Jesus Christ. Alright. Color. This is text color, right? So white. Background color is red. Color here is white. Background color here is black. Color here is yellow. And the background color here is green. There we go. Now, rather than putting all of these properties and having them generated from our PHP script, all we have to generate is which class we want this cell to be in, which is much easier. And it also means that whoever's designing the CSS for your website does not have to ever touch your PHP code, which is probably correct. So, let's throw some PHP in here. PHP. How do we get a random number?
Rand,
That's right, rand. 0 to max. Is this inclusive or exclusive? In PHP, it's inclusive. Now, all we need is a very simple if statement, checking evenness, oddness, or zeroness. If num is equal to 0, then, I know this is like a Java way of thinking, but I'm going to do it anyway. I just have to initialize my variable, I'm sorry. So that one's green. Semicolon. Evens are black. Even is red. How about what else? Now, isn't that nice to read? I think that's nice to read. Certainly beats like trying to inline all of this, all these two things, and like copying out there. That's just ugly. All right. Now, does anybody recall how we might be able to stick the number from PHP into our HTML code? Well, we open a PHP tag. Right? However, PHP provides us a shortcut for all of this. You can also write it like this, which is even nicer. Or class oh. Oh, it's not an HTML page, that's the reason. There we go. Refresh. There we go. So, one point I would like to bring to your attention. Right here. Is that big enough? You guys see that? I should have asked this earlier. Boom. Right here. These quotation marks. Here's a question for you. Why is it not treating this as a string? Why is it interpreting it? Anybody have any idea?
If you take away the quotations, at least on my program, it still works.
Really?
I don't know if maybe it's just like,
Okay, but that's, be that as it may, I did.
I was gonna say it's because it's weekly type, like, why do you, why, you're returning like, aren't you receiving a string news? Like you're, isn't a class variable, like when you input it, you're just like, you're called colors anyways, quotations, you know what I'm trying to say?
I do. But your answer is, since this is a string anyways, it works fine with the quotes.
Yeah.
No. It's a little more subtle than that. Yes?
PHP code.
Can you elaborate?
The program sees with the question marks, reads it as PHP code.
Yes.
So it marks the quotations as redundant. Or it reads it as if it were a variable,
Yes.
like as in installation, whatever.
It is absolutely true that with this command, you are turning on the PHP interpreter, and with this command, you are turning off the PHP interpreter. My question is, why is this not being considered an HTML string? Yes?
does it have to do with like the echo, like the echo from PHP?
Does PHP run first and then HTML run later?
There we go! Yes! The PHP runs first, the HTML runs second. This file, as far as the PHP is concerned, this is just a text file. The HTML elements are not being loaded and interpreted at the time the PHP is running. The PHP runs first, the HTML runs second. And second, once it's hit the client. Right? Remember the orders that things occur in. That's going to be important for the test. Right? You got to know when the PHP is running, when it's not running. Here's a follow-up question. Does any PHP code reach the client?
No.
No. It's all processed out of the file on the server before it gets put into the packet to be kicked out to the client. Right? So, the reason that this is interpreted as a PHP tag and not as a strict string is because, because in HTML, if we forgot this one, right, it would consider the rest of the file to be quoted in that string, right? The reason it does this is because it doesn't care. It doesn't care what these characters are. It literally just thinks of them as some characters in the file, right? Until you open up the PHP interpreter, then it's like, okay, this is code. I'm going to execute this code. And then here, it's like, okay, back to characters that I really have no idea or care what they are or what they contain in any way, shape, or form. It's like another way of saying that. The PHP interpreter is like, okay, starting my problem, this is my problem, this is my problem, this is my problem, this is no longer my problem, now this is your problem, this is all your problem, until it's here, your problem, your problem, your problem, okay, this is my problem again, this is your problem, this is my problem, and now the rest of it is your problem. And that's its conversation with the client, and it doesn't do anything that's not its problem. Does that make sense? Good. I know it's kind of like a bit of a subtle point, but it's important to know stuff like that. So, have I convinced you that this is a nicer way of doing it? Yeah, this is quite readable, right? Like, how many programming languages do you want to read at once? Right? Yeah. So, any further questions? Okay. Study hard for the test. Reread everything. Try some practice problems. If you haven't done the exercises in Canvas already, do them. Right. Yes. Friday is yet more test review. Yet more test review.